All right. So this is developing Google Slides for Pear Deck. So we're going to talk about Pear Deck if you're not familiar, and I'll give you some tips on designing those slides in order to make your Pear Deck presentations most effective. So my name's Robin Ventimiglia. My email is on the screen in green. Feel free to email me after the session if you have more questions. There will be opportunities along the way during the presentation for you to add questions and comments. There's a very small number of us, so feel free to unmute to ask questions or to add your question to the chat. I have been teaching 11 years. I taught middle grades ELA for 6 years before switching to high school English. I've been working at the high school for 5 years now, and I became nationally board certified in 2019. Pear Deck pretty much saved my life during all of the pandemic and COVID issues when we were remote and then back in the classroom. But for my school, we were still using devices one-to-one. So Pear Deck was a godsend. So the first thing you're going to need to do is sign up for your Pear Deck account. You can do this by opening a tab. Oh, another guest. Open a new tab in the top of your browser and go to peardeck.com / Google Slides, or you can just Google Pear Deck and it should come up. Okay. So if you do not already have Pear Deck, you will need to do this step to be able to participate today. If you already have Pear Deck, a Pear Deck account, and you're ready to rock and roll, that's awesome. I'm gonna give those that still need to get theirs another minute or two. So after you have gone to peardeck.com / Google Slides, you're going to use the teacher login and log in with Google. And you're going to use your teacher email to do this. If you're a Microsoft user, then you can use the login with Microsoft instead. Right. So once you have done these steps, then it'll ask you to authorize with Google. You're going to choose to allow pretty much access to all of those Google items. Welcome. For those of you that are just joining us, if you do not yet have a Pear Deck account, you'll need to go to peardeck.com / Google Slides, choose teacher login, log in with Google, and then you'll be allowing the access. I'll give you just a minute to do that. Yes, so you will do the trial version for now. I'm not sure how many, I think it lasts for a month now. It lasted longer before COVID. I believe the cost is $150 per account for the year. My county has chosen to purchase it for all of its teachers. So if you find Pear Deck really useful, I would encourage you to possibly talk to your administration or someone at the district level to see if they have any funding that they might be able to use to purchase a Pear Deck account for you or possibly your school. Otherwise, there are some basic features of Pear Deck that you can use. It's just not the premium. So you'll get, I believe, 3 out of the 6 options for interactive responses. All right, so after you have authorized with Google and allowed them access, I'm going to ask you can click on that bit.ly you see, or you can open a new tab and type it in, and I'll help you narrow down the tabs in just a moment. I know it's a lot to get set up and prepped for the rest of the session. I apologize for the back and forth. And this bit.ly will be available on future slides if you're still trying to get caught up. So what I'll have you do during this session is I'm going to demonstrate some the use of Pear Deck in guiding a presentation, letting students interact, and you'll be able to see some tips on how to design your slide to make that more efficient. And then you'll also be given some work time so that you can actually start developing some slides for yourself. Now, for this purpose of today, you are welcome to put whatever you want on this practice slides. This is just for you to keep. Obviously, you don't have to turn anything in or anything like that. But I will have you take a few minutes here and there to start building these slides so that you can practice presenting in Pear Deck. But if you want to start building something for the beginning of the school year, by all means. All right. So once you have signed up for Pear Deck, you only have to do this the one time. So after this, you should be able to just jump right into Google Slides and start your Pear Deck. You're going to need to get the Pear Deck add-on for Google Slides. Oh, you're having trouble with the bit.ly? Maybe try typing it in. Did you hover over the link to see if you could click it and it's not working? So just open a new tab and try typing it in. Let me make sure it's still. Sorry about that. Let's see. Yeah, so when I type that in, it is working, but I will drop that in the chat for you. Just test it out. Sorry about that, guys. It is case sensitive, so that could also be a factor. But it is in the chat now if you want to click the link there from your Zoom. So this is just going to create practice slides for you. It will force you to copy it, and then you'll have your copy of your practice slides. All right. So this is where we're going to get the add-on for the Google Slides. So now that you have your copy of the practice presentation, then you are going to go to add-ons on the menu bar, get add-ons, and search for Pear Deck. So again, that's in your practice slide, so you should be in your Google Slides that you copied. And click add-ons on the menu and get add-ons. When you do and you search for Pear Deck, you'll see this golden app with the little green pear. If it is already installed in your Google Slides, it's going to say installed in that top right corner. If not, you'll click on it and install it, and then you'll be ready to rock and roll. For those of you that may have joined a little late, if you have not joined the Pear Deck, you can go to joinpd.com and type that code in the top right corner. All right. So during the session, I'm going to ask you to toggle back and forth between these tabs, between the copy of the practice slides and the presentation session. So one of them should have the little gold Google Slides icon, and one has the cute little green pear. You may want to exit out of other tabs. Of course, don't leave the Zoom meeting, but just kind of leave that in the background unless you need to use the chat or to unmute. Then you shouldn't really have to do a whole lot in the Zoom for most of the presentation. If you know how to pin your tabs, you can right-click over your tab and pin it so that it doesn't go anywhere and it's at the very forefront of your tabs. But we're going to be going back just between these two. All right. And then if you do need to return to Zoom, you'll of course look for that minimized box for Zoom and use the little green arrow to have that pop back to full screen. If you're using a Windows device, it should be on your menu bar at the bottom. Any questions so far? All right. Just to start, if you will, slide that little icon to whichever photo best represents your familiarity and comfort level with Google Slides. Are you still a little bit hesitant to work in them? Maybe you're a PowerPoint user and you've never dabbled too much in slides. Are you getting pretty good but still need that life raft? Or have you been going along swimmingly for a while? All right, it looks like most of you are at least intermediate Google Slides user. So I'll run through the Google Slides portions of it a little bit faster than maybe normally, although I only have a few people that have responded at this point. So if you know that you're going to need me to go a little slower, then please go ahead and move that dot. You'll click on that presentation session tab and you should see where you can move that dot back and forth. All right. If you will, go ahead and drag that dot and let me know where you are with Pear Deck. Maybe some of us have used it. This is meant to be a beginner level course. So I apologize if you have used it and you're feeling like this is moving a little too slowly. Awesome. Okay, so most of us are new to Pear Deck. Wonderful. Well, the thing to remember is that Pear Deck is a tool for embedding interactive response options. So this means you must add your instructions and questions to your slide. The only exception is when we hit our multiple choice response options, but everything else, you're pretty much just going to design your slide however you would normally have it to present to your class. And then you'll just be able to drop in those different response options. Just a few slide designing tips. If you're not used to using keyboard shortcuts, you are welcome to click on that link you see in the center of the screen and just save that for later use. It is just some keyboard shortcuts. If you get used to using Control-C, Control-V, I promise it goes a lot faster. That's for copy and paste. There's other little tips in there as well. And we will reach a point where we will be on student pace, so you'll be able to return to these tips when you're building your own slides. So if you feel like, whoa, this is going too fast, you will have the chance to revisit them. So another, the tools that I use probably most often when building them for Pear Deck is going to be the fill effect, which looks like the little paint can. your border, and your border width. So I just use this to try to make questions stand out for my students so they know exactly what I'm expecting and when. Another quick tip, if you're using a Windows device and you're not used to using the snipping tool, the snipping tool allows you to just take a quick snip of anything on your screen. So it can be just part of it or the entire screen. So it just saves you the time of using print screen and then having to crop it to a certain section. If you're not familiar with cropping photos into different shapes, you do have that option when you add a photo and you choose to crop it using the crop icon you see highlighted. You can then use the drop down beside it to select a shape, and then it will shape your photo for you. That's just one little design technique. And then you also have the option of taking shapes that you put in your slides and setting transparency so that they can highlight something or be used as a call out. So you'll use the insert menu or the menu bar to add your overlapping shape or your call out. And then once you've done so, you're gonna choose that, you're gonna make sure it's highlighted so that the perimeter is dotted. And then you'll select that fill icon, which is the paint can, and choose custom. Once you've selected custom, you'll see that there's a transparency bar towards the bottom above the word OK. So once you've set your color, you can adjust it so that you can then see through the box and it's less opaque, and then select OK. So again, these are just some general tips. Most of you seemed pretty familiar with Google Slides. So if I went too fast through that, I apologize. I will be happy to answer questions when you go to design your own. So the interactive response options we're going to look at today are text, choice, number, draw, and draggable. In your Google Slides, you will have to open that Pear Deck menu by going to the add-ons on your menu each time you want to insert your interactive response options or each time you start your new slideshow. So we're not going to do website because that basically just adds a linkable website to the side of your slideshow for your students. So let's talk about the text write-in responses. These are going to be the easiest, and these are free even without, if your trial has expired and no one will, buy the premium for you, then you can use text, choice, and number without ever paying a dime. It's draw and draggable that are going to be in the premium account, but for your trial, you should have some time to work with draw and draggable. And once you've added them into a presentation, they will stay there even after your trial has ended. So these are the easiest because if you notice as a student, you see the response box to the right of the presentation. So if you're not in the presentation session, go ahead and take a look at that tab and you'll see that answer box to the right. So this is an example of a get to know you I might use with my students. Type 3 separate statements about yourself. 2 should be truths, 1 should be a lie. And then I like to add very specific directions like hit enter to format them with space between each statement. This is just going to assist you when you're trying to view them on your teacher dashboard, because there is a teacher dashboard where you can see the students responding in real time. Notice that there's nowhere for you to click submit. You're not hitting submit. As you type, I can see everything that's being typed. So your students it would be the same way where there's going to be little ellipses if they're still working on it. Otherwise, it's going to just, once they're done typing, you'll see their response. I'm hoping that this engagement in London was a truth. That's super fun. So thank you to those of you that are responding so that you can see how this looks for a student viewing this. So what you'll be able to do as a teacher is you can then show responses. So when you're presenting, you'll have that ability and it will be anonymous. So for example, if you look at the presentation screen, you'll see that it says, my favorite movie is Thor Ragnarok. I'm 28 years old. I've been teaching for 6 years. Notice there's no name attached. You'll have a student dashboard where you'll be able to see who said what. But if you want to share it with your class with no names, you do have that option. It really helps with discussion a lot. Right, here's another example, and you do not need to feel like you have to answer all of these. I just gave you some different examples, how I might use it in my classroom, maybe to prompt their brainstorming about the definition of the word jovial. So use the context from the image to guess the vocabulary word meaning. I use this in my class a lot. You may ask them to identify the type of angle. You can add a bit of text that you want them to read and then respond to. I even use it for them to write whole constructed responses. Oh, you can't answer the questions? Well, this is bizarre. I'm wondering if it's a little bit of a glitch. We did this morning. When you go to type your answer, it's taking you back to the beginning. I'm sorry. It looked like you were able to respond to, I had some people that were able to respond to the this statement, the 3 statements, the 2 truths and a lie. Maybe exit the presentation session and then reopen a new tab and go to joinpd.com like it says in the top right corner and try entering that code again and see if it lets you respond then. My 2 people that were successfully responding, you don't have to try to answer it, but if you'll just try to type something in that box and make sure that it's okay. So Catherine's is working. That looks good. All right. Thank you. For those of you that weren't able to respond, were you able to reboot it? Oh, it did it. Awesome. Good, good, good. Wonderful. All right. Or for example, you may use a graphic in science and ask them to modify something. Sure, the code is in the top right corner of the screen. If you look at the Zoom share screen, you should see it, but I can also add it here in the chat. It's going to be joinpd.com, and then that is the code, NPL-EDU. Sorry about that. Sometimes it gets a little glitchy. All right, so this is where I'm going to ask you to pop back over to that copy of the slides you created. And you're going to use that copy to go ahead and design one slide for your text response. And again, this is probably the simplest to use because all you have to do is put your question on that slide. It can be, what is your preferred name for the beginning of the year? And then your students will type in. It's going to automatically collect their email addresses, their names, and then if you added the what is your preferred name, then you'd be collecting that information as well. Play around with those fill effects and the borders to make things stand out. And then I will walk you through adding that text response in about 3 minutes. I am going to put it back on student paste. So if you play around with the presentation, you'll notice you can go back to those tips on those tips on the fill effects and cropping the photos and some of those other tips. This is also a great time if you came in late and you're feeling a little lost. I'm happy to answer any questions. You're welcome to add them to the chat or unmute to ask. Right, for those of you that have your questions set, and maybe you had the chance to play with those fill effects. If not, you'll have some more opportunities. I'm going to pull you back to my presentation slide if you have migrated on by turning off student pace mode, and I'll show you those in just a moment. If you will, now click on your practice slides. Click on the slide you just added your question to, and you're going to go back to that add-on and open your Pear Deck add-on. This is going to show this Pear Deck menu on the right side of your screen. And once you see this Pear Deck menu, you're going to select ABC or the text button. Once you've selected it, you'll see Pear Deck working, and then you'll see a gray bar appear at the bottom of the slide. Now, the reason Pear Deck is a little tricky is because you are not going to see what your students see. So where all you see is that little gray bar at the bottom of your screen or the bottom of the slide that you just created, your students will see, if you look back at the presentation session tab, your students will see that slide to the left with their answer box to the right. Unfortunately, there's no great way to preview this without starting a session and then logging into your own. But does anyone have any questions or comments at this time? You're welcome to type those in the chat, unmute, or you can add them to this presentation slide. All right, let's rock and roll. So next there's the choice response. So this is the only one where it's a little bit different and not everything is going to be on the slide. You do not have to put your answer choice options on the slide. they're going to get embedded in your response. And I'll show you a little more about what I mean. So if you notice on the left side of your presentation screen, if you go back to the presentation session, you'll see this question that I've put on my slide to the left, but your answer choices for you to select from are actually embedded in the response and available on the right side of the screen. So if you will, just humor me and choose the option that best reflects your option, or excuse me, your opinion of the 2020-2021 school year. And your options were, it was a unique opportunity for me to grow as an educator. I survived it and now I'm invincible. It was the worst teaching year of my life. What year? I've already purged it from my memory. If you would have asked me this in May, I would have chosen D. I guess June. Wow, lots of people, I love this. Lots of people chose, it was a unique opportunity to grow as an educator, and that's always impressive if you came out of last year feeling fired up and ready to make things better. So if you notice, this is not what you guys chose. I took a screenshot earlier just to show you how it would appear. If you were to choose when you're presenting to your students to show the responses, then again, it is anonymous, but this is a great way to do formative assessments with your students and to show them things like, oh, most of us chose A. Let's just, you know, if you chose A and you're willing to explain why, please tell me. It's a really good discussion starter, honestly. Even though this is a digital format for presenting, it actually drove a lot of discussion when I was teaching remotely. Here's another example if you wanted to add your text. Notice that I use the fill effects and the borders to make the question stand out on top of the text that they're going to use. Again, you don't have to answer, it's just to show you. And your answer choices aren't on the slide this time, they are embedded to your right. When you go to choose the choice option from your Pear Deck menu, you're going to see this little box beside the orange arrow, and that's where you're going to insert your options. So you'll type in your different options, and then once you update the slide, they are embedded. So take a few minutes now and return to your practice slides and create a multiple choice question. It can be silly or possibly something you can use in the future. And once you do so, you're going to click your add-on, open that Pear Deck menu if it's not already open, choose choice, and add those answer choices. Give us about 3 or 4 minutes on that. And if you have questions or comments, feel free to unmute and ask. I will do my best to assist. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll also put it back on that student pace so that you can return to those tips for your Google Slides. About 1 more minute. Again, once you've created your question, you're going to click the add-on menu. You'll select choice from your Pear Deck menu and add those choices. All right, we're going to exit that student pace mode. If you're looking at the presentation session again, you should see that you can enter any questions or comments you may have at this time. Oh, that's a great question. So the question was, are you ever selecting a correct response as a key? Unfortunately, there is not a way of adding a correct answer. If you want to make it easier on yourself, you can add it into like the comments of your Google Slides so that you just refresh your memory. It's a lot of times you just kind of have to remember if there are correct answers, what the correct answer is. Otherwise, using it for feedback is always great, or quick formative assessments. I usually use it, honestly, for quick formative assessments where there are right answers. And like I said, you may just have to jot it down on a little sheet of paper or something so you remember what the answers were. Let's see, do we delete? You shouldn't. You can delete the text box that I have there. Do you mean the text box with your question in it? Sorry. Oh, sure. If you're not using anything on your slide that you don't need because it's not being used, you can feel free to just completely remove it, because you just want your slide to look exactly the way you would want your students to see it. So anything you want to delete or add, that is completely at your discretion, so that you can design it the way you would like to. You can see the options on the teacher dashboard. So once your students start answering, you'll see a teacher if you have your teacher dashboard open, which is I have on a separate screen over here. That's why I keep looking this way. I apologize if you're like, where's she looking at? So I have a teacher dashboard open where I can read your comments and your questions. And if there's multiple choice answers, then I will see how many students have responded a specific way. And since it's a teacher dashboard, I can actually say who chose what if I wanted to. Good questions. All right, so next we have number responses. Students can insert whole numbers and decimals as their response option. So kind of like the text response, yes, they could respond with a number. What's pretty cool about the number responses is when you go to share them with your class, who said what, it shows it on a number line. So you can see outliers and medians. So for example here, insert whole numbers and or decimals to respond to the prompt. Past year has shaved how many years off of your life? Looks like some of us have lost 10 years, 5. I feel ya. Every time I try to remember when something happened, it was such a time suck. I love it. All right, so here's just a quick example of what that number line would look like if you were presenting and wanted to show your responses anonymously. And it will show those medians. It will show, you can talk about outliers. Of course, this is going to lend itself very nicely to math. You can give them the shapes to solve for. But obviously you could use it the way I did as a prompt to get people talking, get them to know each other, or even just, you know, ask them, how old are you? So now take a few minutes and go ahead and design a slide that requires a number answer. If it's history, you could say, what year did this happen? With Pear Deck, it's all about just getting the hang of it. It is a learning curve, and once you've made a few slides and done it a couple of times, it'll go very quickly and it'll feel like riding a bike. Oh, and let me put that student pace mode on for you. And if you haven't tried inserting images, you can insert images, practice those cropping images, practice filling, those keyboard shortcuts. Got about a minute and a half. Another thing that's pretty neat whenever you are going into student pace mode so that students can go back and forth in your presentation, you do have the ability to, in your teacher dashboard, to kind of slide through and see students and which slides, you know, they're utilizing or working in. You can give feedback and make comments on their work. All right, so once you've created your number slide, then of course go to that add-on and open that Pear Deck menu. Click number icon to insert the number interactive response, and you'll see that gray bar show up on the bottom of that slide. And I'm going to stop that student pace mode. Once you stop the student pace mode, it does force participants back onto whichever slide the instructor is using at the time. So if you have any other questions or comments, please feel free to add them in the presentation session now. So that's a great question, Becky. So this, let's see, I don't want your name to be attached. So on my teacher dashboard that I can see everybody, it is going to have your names. Becky, do you mind if your name is visible with your question? Okay, thank you. All right, so if you look at your Zoom, your shared Zoom screen right now, then you'll see what the teacher dashboard looks like. And so notice I can see who gave what response, and you can change the grid layout, and you can provide feedback here. So then if I responded, then I'll send the feedback and the student will see it pop up in the corner of their screen. So this is, again, I use Pear Deck mainly formatively. I will use it sometimes with, where do I see the teacher dashboard? It's because I'm running the session. In a few minutes towards the end, you're going to practice running your own session, and then you'll see the teacher dashboard. But that's going to be how you can view student progress and give feedback. All right, if you'll come back to the presentation session tab, we'll look at draw responses. Now, this is a premium feature. Again, if it's already embedded in a Google Slide presentation during your trial run, then they're not going to take it away from you. Just in the future, if you're creating another one, then you would need that. Although, I don't know if I'm supposed to give this little tip. I'm pretty sure if you've already got a draw response in one of your slides and you copy the slide and just paste it into another Google slide, you can edit it. So a little workaround for that. So your draw responses, you're going to want your slides look exactly the way you want your students to see it so that they can draw anywhere on it. So for example, I left a lot of space at the bottom of this one to give people plenty of space for drawing, because it does take up space when you're using those tools. But go ahead and look at the student toolbar and check out the pen, the highlighter. Notice you can insert a text box. And then I just make sure to tell the students exactly what I want them to do in the instructions. Draw a school appropriate image that represents your summer. Add text to define or explain your drawing. And if you wish to do that, you're welcome to play around with those tools for a moment. It is pretty good to see what draw options students have. And I like to encourage mine to use the text box, because it is a lot easier than trying to write something with your mouse. There we go. Got some people playing around now. And then again, as kind of like a get to know you option at the beginning of the school year, you can keep it anonymous, but you can show your responses anonymously to the students. And so if you look at my presentation session again, you'll see some examples of some student responses. Oh, some people enjoyed the ocean. Some people enjoyed just relaxing on the couch watching TV. But there's a lot you can really do with this one. I also really like the teacher dashboard and the anonymity of showing responses to the class, because it allows me to choose students that I know are on the right track or know the answer, and I can call on them and help build their confidence, because I already know they've gotten it right, and say, hey, Tommy, do you mind sharing your answer with the class? It's a really nice feature. So here's another example where you might put an excerpt from a text and ask them to locate evidence using the highlighter tools. An example of matching terms with definitions, but notice that everything is on the slide. It's on the slide, and you just want it to look exactly the way it should when students are going to interact with it. Here's an example of a diagram of a cell. Now notice this is similar to a text response, but the difference with the text response is you can't actually label different parts. You would just be, they would have to answer number 1 is this, number 2 is this, number 3 is this, which is fine, but it might be a little more interesting or fun for them to create text boxes and actually type into the appropriate boxes. Here's an example of being able to use this for something multi-step. I like the draw for multi-step, especially with text, because I can say highlight this, then add text to show your annotations for this particular element in literature, or highlight the coefficient. And oh, that should be blue, not orange. Highlight the variable in yellow, and then type your answer in the box. All right, so I'll give you a few minutes if you want to return to that slide presentation and start designing a draw slide you might use for your students. And I'll put that back on student mode for you. About 30 more seconds on that, and we'll be moving on to the last response option. Then we'll discuss the few other features of Pear Deck and student mode, as well as practicing your actually starting a lesson and seeing how your slides appear. Okay. Are there any questions or comments at this time? If you return to the Pear Deck presentation session, you can, let me turn off student pacing mode. You can insert those questions or comments now. Okie dokie. So our last response we're going to talk about today are draggable responses. This is going to require a little bit more slide prep. You're going to need to organize the items on your slide and actually count the number of draggables required, because it does only allow you to use up to 5 draggables. So you're not going to want to put 7 options on the screen if you're asking students only to answer 5 things. So here's an example for a get to know you I like to use, this or that. You've seen this on social media, I'm sure, and the students always have a lot of fun with these templates. And so you would just slide those little blue stars to select your choice. I always find it entertaining that Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings are usually split pretty evenly. So then here's an example of what it might look like once you show those responses again, so you can discuss, hey, this class prefers books on paper, so I'll try not to give you digital text. Or I see we have a lot of comedy fans, and help you select what you're going to use with your students. So when you add your icons, you're going to follow those same steps using the Pear Deck menu to insert the draggable, but you're going to see this box pop up on your screen, and you're going to add as many as you need to, and it'll say, you'll see the little add button. But once you do, you can actually change the shape of them. And if you notice, this little menu continues, and it includes math symbols as well as numbers and other icon options. So you can choose your icon option, you can choose your colors, and that can be all green or all blue or a mixture. It's completely up to you. And then you can adjust the size of the icon, because if you need them to be very specific and pinpoint one word on the screen, you don't want the icon to take up a quarter of the screen. So here's an example of a mapping activity I do with the memoir Night to help students kind of understand the movements, and they can drag their little flags to the correct countries. Here's an example of how I might use it for grammar. Notice designing the slide and adding call outs for hints that they may need to be reminded of. Sometimes, especially in student mode, I may link the film that I want them to watch or the clip that I want them to watch, and then they'll come back into the presentation to drag the icons to select the symbolism that they saw in the film. It's important to note things for your students like, hey, you won't need to use all of them. Like, yeah, you have 4 options, but there may not be 4 major symbols in this short film. So now go ahead and return to your practice slides and try designing one for a draggable option. And remember, think ahead and decide how many draggables will they need. Maybe you want to put a couple of images on there. Ask them how they're feeling, and they can slide their icon. Like, do you feel like you've mastered this content? And they can slide it or scale it along. Got about another minute and a half on that. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the student paste mode to bring you back. Take another few seconds if you need to. Does anyone have any questions? I can move back to one of those question or comment slides, or you can just unmute or add it to the chat. Okay. All right, so another option you have instead of designing your own slides is to look at the template library. So if in just a moment, I'm gonna give you a couple minutes to explore that. Under your practice slide, or if you go back to your practice slides and you open that add-on and you, can you drag text? No, you cannot have them drag the text. I do wish that that was an option. That would be really, really cool. Yeah, they haven't allowed you to customize the icons that well yet, but that would be a really good suggestion to make. They might add it on. But so if you go back into your practice slides and you open that Pear Deck add-on, I encourage you to use the blue template library and just open it. You're not going to hurt anything by exploring. So if you slide through, you'll see some ready-made slides for different content areas actually, and then some of them are for formative assessments that are cross-curricular. The other option you'll see on that menu is add audio to slide. And when you add that audio, you'll just click the button. It's super user-friendly because it comes up and it has a big red button, record, and then you can stop the recording, and then the audio is automatically embedded into the presentation. So I use this when I have a substitute, and I'll create the presentation that I want my students to work through and add audio as I feel is needed. And then that way they're hearing my voice and hopefully helping keep them on track a little bit. So I'll give you all a few minutes to explore that, and feel free to ask me any questions. So when you open those practice slides that you're creating, it's not in the actual template library. There's a separate button at the, hold on one moment, let me, towards the bottom of the Pear Deck menu. So below where you've added your interactive responses, but above featured content. Did that answer your question? Oh, awesome, thank you. We'll take about 1 more minute of exploring. All right. Now, to start your lesson, it's going to be important to note that you must start a new session for like each class. You can use the same code, but then you're going to have all of your students jumbled together. And when you start a lesson, it's actually outside of Google Slides. And since it's in that new tab and it's a new session, you can no longer edit your slides and have it affect the Pear Deck presentation. So any changes you make to that slideshow, you'd have to start a new session. So just keep that in mind. Yes, for the question that was just asked about accessing the presentation later, I will post a link to the slides at the end of the presentation. So each time you start that lesson, it's going to open as a new session, and then it's opening outside of Google Slides. So we're going to practice that right now. Once you begin, there are options for reopening a session if you exit out of it. So don't sweat it if you completely lose your session. But for now, just go back into your Google Slides, and you're going to open that Pear Deck menu and start the lesson. And when you start the lesson, you're going to see it open a screen that looks like the one you first logged into for my presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Before that, it will ask you instructor paste or student paste. For today's purposes, practice with instructor paste. It's going to allow you to control what the students see versus student paste. Students will have to move at their own pace. So if you're thinking, okay, so now what? If you have a mobile device handy, or if you have another device, then you can just go to that joinpd.com like you see on the screen and log into your own presentation so you can see the student view. Otherwise, you can use an incognito browser. That's Control-Shift-N, and go to joinpd.com and follow the instructions to join your own session. When I first started doing this, I joined my session almost every time to make sure that it looked correct before I showed it to my students. Once you get the hang of it and you feel more comfortable with it, then you won't need to do that every time. I'll give y'all just a few minutes to take care of that, give it a shot, and then that way you can ask me some questions if you have them. All right, does anyone have any questions now regarding starting a lesson? If so, you can come back to my presentation session and ask those. Otherwise, if you're looking at your teacher view versus student view, for the teacher menu at the bottom, you'll see that show responses. And once a student has participated, you'll be able to see those responses. You'll see that you can lock your screens. Locking your screens is really useful when you want to keep students from so when I want to show responses to the class about where everybody put their dragables, if I don't lock my screen, they can keep moving them. And they're going to see the kids just moving them all over the screen and think it's funny. So locking your screen before you show responses is always helpful, especially if you're using the draw slide, because that is real-time drawings. And unless you lock the screen, the kids could have the chance to put something they shouldn't put on their draw screen when you're showing the rest of the class. All right. So there are plenty more resources at peardeck.com. I have linked that directly to the video tutorials if you want to click on that link so that you can review those later. These videos are super helpful. They have others that help you to build those slideshows as well, like you've seen in this session. But I would definitely recommend video number 6, how to use the dashboard as a remote control and for managing student responses. So number 5 and 6. If you wouldn't mind dragging that little icon to let me know if this was helpful for you today. Just helps me make adjustments as necessary for the future. Here. Yeah, so if you don't have students, that's why it's going to keep circling. You'll want to use your phone to join your own session just to see what it looks like, and then it'll register that you have a student. Does that make sense? Or you could use an incognito browser, or you may just, if you're at school at the beginning of the school year and you want to get some presentation practice, you could ask a couple of your colleagues, hey, do you mind testing out this presentation with me, and have them log in for you or log into your session with you, and you could practice presenting to them. Did that answer your question, Rebecca? Okay, awesome. All right, last chance for any burning questions, comments. I am happy to stick around for a few minutes following if you have something you want to ask more specifically for you. Otherwise, feel free to add those into the box. All right. So we're going to return now to the shared Zoom screen. I have to do this in order to remove the little green box that shows your QR code for the session. I'm also going to share that link for the slides with you right now in the chat. All right, so all of the slides are there in the chat now. They're also available on that original sheet that they shared for your sign up. So if you need to access these slides later and you've lost the link, you're also welcome to email me. Again, that's Robin Ventimiglia or ventimiglia@bcswan.net. And then now if you are over at the Zoom screen, you're going to be using that Performance Matters mobile app that I mentioned on the first slide, and you're going to scan that QR code. If you're having trouble with the QR code, then you do have the option for an alternate attendance form at the bit.ly you see at the bottom. Just open a new tab and type in that bit.ly. bit.ly/NCBOLD alt ATT. And then with just a couple minutes to spare, the final thing that they'd like for you to do for the NCBOLD sessions, please provide your feedback using this bit.ly. And I can go ahead and add all of that into the chat as well. And for the alternate attendance. If you didn't have the chance to scan that QR code, then you can use the link I gave you to the slides to revisit it. All right. Well, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining. I know it's not as easy in the afternoon sometimes, and I hope that you're enjoying some other sessions over the next, day. And I hope you have a great evening. Thank you for being here, and thank you. I am here for a minute if you have any specific burning questions. Oh, you're welcome. Darlene, can you add your email and I'll email you the link for the slides? I'll send you that link. Oh, you're welcome. I'm now going to end the session. Thank you and have a great day.